Ohio State held its 9th practice of the spring Monday morning here at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. That's 2/3 of the way through the spring. We knew there were position battles coming in on the offensive line. Who was going to start at right guard? Who was going to start at right tackle, depending on who started at right guard. Some interchangeable pieces there. Obviously, a new center in the mix. Are all those position battles over? I'm Nathan Baird from cleveland.com, along with Andrew Gillis and Stephen Means. Stephen, you watched the offense pretty intensely Saturday for the open practice the Student Appreciation Day scrimmage sessions that we saw, and from what you saw today, that day, and the conversations we had today with Justin Fry and the offensive line, does it feel like the best five has already been identified?
Yeah, I'm about 99.9% sure I know who the starting offensive line is going to be when they take the field on August 31st. And a lot would have to – now, we've been down this road before, right, in 2021, and then out of nowhere, DeJuan Jones takes a role. So you don't want to say you're 100%, but Joshua Simmons, Donovan Jackson as your left side, left tackle, left guard. Seth McLaughlin, you brought him in as a veteran starting center from Alabama, so you're expecting him to eventually win that job, even though Carson Hinsman had it last year. And so that right side is really where all the question marks are. But from what we saw on Saturday, from how these guys were talking today, I think Josh Fryer is just going to keep his job as the right tackle, while Luke Montgomery is your new right guard as the latest of this the Ryan Day era top 100 offensive lineman in year one has this small role. In year two, they're a starter on the interior of the offensive line, because even Paris Johnson on the interior of the offensive line in year two. And Luke Montgomery is the interesting piece there because of the way Ryan Day talked about him when we asked him about it at the beginning of the spring practice, but also how he talked about it. He's really excited to play for Chip Kelly, and he brought up his basketball background a lot and his athleticism and what that could mean in this system as a guy who's a pulling guard a lot. So he's really excited about that. But I think the rest of this spring is just, as Justin Fry was kind of explaining, making sure you have gradable snaps everywhere for everybody. But I think the overall starting offensive line is pretty set 9 practices into things.
So in 2021, there were 2 developments between the end of the spring and the start of the season. One was Harry Miller dealing with some things, and that opened the door for Luke Whippler to take over as center. But the other one was DeJuan Jones, who was not in that starting 5 as we ended the spring, getting a few days into fall camp and being like, nope, that's probably our starting right tackle, and it rearranged everything. And on paper, you would look at this and say, well, Tegra Shabola is maybe the most likely person for that to happen with, somebody who pops in such a big way that it moves everything around. But that was maybe when we were thinking he could play either guard or tackle. Sounds a lot more like he might be repping exclusively at tackle or almost exclusively at tackle. Josh Fryer said he's only playing enough guard right now to be prepared if they absolutely needed him there for some reason. It's further evidence that maybe this thing is locking into place early, which I think could be an asset for them if they can build some cohesion and confidence over the next 4 or 5 months.
Yeah, I think so. I asked Coach Fry this exactly. I was like, how do you balance experimentation versus trying to get guys reps with one another? I mean, Luke Montgomery and Josh Fryer have probably not played a lot next to one another. And like you said, we're 9 practices into this. He said it's more about getting reps against the specific set of guys on the defensive line. And I think in a weird kind of roundabout way, it does kind of give you a look, because you've got Jack Sawyer and JT Tuimoloau, Ty Hamilton, Tyleik Williams. Like, that's a great front four, and it's, okay, who's getting the reps against those guys? Okay, who's getting the reps against Caden McDonald and Hero Kanu? Okay, who's getting the reps against Kenyatta Jackson and Caden Curry? So I think you can kind of mess around with that. I'm not going to go as far as 99.99, however many nines you threw on that. I'm just going to say it's early. The first game of the year isn't for another 5 months, or just under 5 months now. Like, there's still a lot of time here. I'm not going to discount Tegra Shabola kind of making a jump and kind of taking over at right tackle. I think that that's where they like him. I think that every time we walk out here, we're like, my God, like, you see the size, you see the athleticism, you just see the ability. So I don't want to discount a jump there. You don't want to discount a lot of things here, because a lot can change considering it is April 1st. So there's just a lot going on. So I think you might have, the best way to put it is this. I think the offensive line is written in pencil, but you can very quickly turn that around and erase some stuff if you have to. You are not set in stone where you're like, you know what, we're good. And you're telling other people, hey, you're on the here's where you are on the 2 deep. I don't think you're at that point yet. I think you might have a rough draft of where you're at, but you are certainly not where you're going to end up in fall camp.
I felt like last spring it was more about identifying options. Like, they weren't 1,000% sure at some positions who the options really were and they got to the end of the spring and they found out they didn't have enough options. They had to go get Josh Simmons from the transfer portal. This spring, I feel like could be more about finding some answers. And Josh Simmons is an example of that, a guy who had kind of an inconsistent first year here, had to really adapt, acclimate quickly, coming from San Diego State to being the starting left tackle here. And now that he's got a real spring and a full offseason under his belt, Justin Fry today was talking about his confidence growth, how much more vocal he's becoming, how much more comfortable he seems to feel. I think you can probably see that translate onto the field. And then getting Seth McLaughlin through the transfer portal, we definitely heard positive things today about just the impact that he made coming in right away and kind of just asserting himself as a true veteran and someone who has a lot of just skill and football IQ and maybe being able to elevate the level of play up front. So I think if it's coming together this way, I think it could be an asset. As long as those 5 guys perform, the added extra time together and the cohesion that can build, I think could make that offensive line even better for this fall. We're going to talk a lot more about that on Buckeye Talk. Get that wherever you can find podcasts, and get the text 614-350-3315. All the things that these guys are saying, we are sending it straight to your phone from cleveland.com.